Hey Josh, how's it going?
Hey, Elliot. It's going pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, welcome to the 9 to 5 podcast. We are continuing on the conversation that we had last time, talking about your carefully laid out plan on how you were going to have this perfect retirement schedule, right?
Yeah, if we look back and listen to that episode, I had all these grand ideas of if I just put together all these spreadsheets, everything's going to fit together nicely and I'm going to have the perfect retirement.
That's right. I mean, I recall spreadsheets on spreadsheets. My fi nerd flag was going off, so you got my ears perked. So I gotta imagine with that level of planning, you have perfectly executed the perfect post-fi life, right?
Yeah, it started out that way, but it quickly eroded. Things evolved very quickly, and we'll get into some of that in detail. But maybe before we jump into that, let's revisit what we talked about as our perfect day leading up to my early
Sure.
retirement. But you talked about that. It may have been one of our previous episodes where you talked through, because you had given this a lot of thought and what you had wanted your perfect day to look like. Can you remind us of what that looked like for you?
Yeah. I mean, real quickly, I would say that mine is really focusing on waking up. That's always a good first step of the day. Working out, eating breakfast, then having some sort of kind of work or creative period up until lunchtime, and then in the afternoon having more of a learn slash socialization time period, whether that's with friends or Dawn or whomever. Then really shifting my day into kid centric time because that's really the phase of life that I'm in. So being able to walk to school to pick up my kids, play with them, have dinner, prep them for bedtime, and then hang out with Dawn. Usually ends up reading a book, watching a show, whatever, and then trying to get those very important 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
How about you, Josh? Can you remind us what your perfect day looked like?
Yeah, I remember you asked me, and I went back and remembered that I actually did go through this exercise. Have you ever seen this book, Elliot? The I Will Teach You to Be Rich Journal by Ramit?
So, I am familiar with the journal. I've never had a copy of the journal. I've read the book. But can you tell the audience what it's all about?
Yeah, it's a lot more in depth because he asks you to think through a lot of exercises on what your rich life for yourself would look like. So I haven't even finished the whole thing. I actually bought this back in 2023 before the first time I went to Economy, and Lori and I were kind of riding through this on that road trip out to Cincinnati. But one of the earliest exercises that he has you do in the book is what would your perfect day look like? And at the time, I wrote it out and I put a lot of it into my notes here. So similar to you, I want to wake up. That's always a good sign. So I like to wake up pretty early. Right now, I still wake up at 5, and that's because Lori goes to work Monday through Thursday, and I really don't have any problem with that. Ideally, I would like to not wake up to an alarm, but honestly, I don't even hear her alarm. So I just kind of wake up when she gets out of bed or goes into the bathroom. But the perfect day scenario, waking up somewhere between 5 and 6, and then having that slow start with coffee and reading for about an hour, which would then lead into exercising for about an hour, either 30 minutes to an hour, and then having what I call more of a slow breakfast. It's funny that all of these things are like slow and deliberate. Take your time. So making breakfast, not being in a hurry, not just eating something that's that's convenient, just actually preparing something like an omelet, then having that time to think about what the day looks like ahead, and then work on a project or activity, some type of work like similar to what you said for the next 3 to 4 hours, and then having a lunch break, maybe a couple more hours of that project after that, and then making dinner. And I put in my notes here an early dinner because with Lori's schedule, she works about 10 to 10 and a half hours. So a lot of times we're not having dinner until around 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, which is honestly a little late for me, not because I'm hungry, but I think because it doesn't give me enough time to digest before we go to bed around 9. So I'd really like to eat ideally sometime in the 4 o'clock hour. That probably sounds way early to a lot of people, especially any of our European friends, right?
Yeah, I was going to say either you're embracing Spanish culture or now we're oscillating back to the senior citizen brigade at 4 o'clock. Although I kind of fall into that trap as well. So I know what you mean.
And then it would be great, again, thinking through what the perfect day would look like, is I'd like to have dinner and then have an activity of some sort afterwards. So walking or hiking, maybe spending time with family or friends after dinner. And then maybe after that, having just a little bit of time to watch a quality television show or play a game or something like that for the last hour or so of the day, and then being back in bed by 9 or 10. So that would be the perfect scenario. And that's what I wanted life to look like as I entered into early retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Josh. So you've laid out this perfect plan for us. So can you tell us what does retirement actually look like for you? You know, what do your days actually look like now?
Well, I'll go back to the very beginning. So I retired in April of 2025. So as time of recording right now, it was just about 5 months ago. And I would say that first week, I had all these great ideas, all these things that I wanted to do. And I felt a little bit like a kid in a toy store where you're just like super excited and you can like play with all these things and get all this stuff done all at the same time. Like you have so much opportunity of all this infinite time now. Obviously, you don't have infinite time, but you feel like you have so much more time because that 40 plus hours a week that you were devoting to your job can now be spread across all these other things. And I may have mentioned it in our last conversation, but I use Cal Newport's time block planner. I use that for my day job. Then I thought, well, I'll just transition and use that for life. And instead of blocking out the individual tasks and meetings and things that I had on my calendar for work, I will do the same for my fun and my activities and all the things that I just mentioned that I would like to see in my perfect day. I started out that first week, and I'll never forget probably my first day, that first Monday of early retirement, where I had a vision in my mind of what I wanted it to look like. I wanted to go on a long bike ride and get that out of the way early in the morning. Not out of the way, but I wanted to experience it early in the morning. Luckily enough, the weather was ideal. It was springtime, early April, and then the low 60s. So I drove out to a park and rode my bike for like 10 miles, and I was finished by like 11 a.m. And I thought, what do I do with the rest of my day? I remember I drove back home. It was still like 11:30, 12 o'clock. I had lunch, and it felt like I just had so much time available. Sat around for maybe 20 or 30 minutes after I ate lunch and just thought, what am I going to do with the rest of the day? And I immediately started doing some yard work and getting prepared for the next day. And I actually had used the time block planner to kind of document some of the things that I was doing. I'm still using it, although I've been adjusting how I'm using it. But I was logging and journaling what I was doing. And as the week progressed, I just started stacking up more and more activities and putting more and more things on my quote unquote to do list. A lot of them were fun, some of them were work, projects around the house. But reflecting back on it now, I can see that it was the beginning of just trying to cram too much all into a small portion of time. Like I thought, okay, here's my week. Let's do all the things. All that stuff that I talked about in the last episode. I want to do it all in a week. I want to make sure I get a bike ride. I want to make sure I get a hike. I want to make sure I spend time with friends and family and work on a project and work on the rentals and all that. So over the course of time, it just became a bit overwhelming.
Sure. Just like a little kid that runs into a candy store where we're quickly approaching Halloween time is you come home from gathering all that delicious candy and then like my kids will probably do is try and house as much as they can and we'll have that impending stomach ache because of all the sugar that they intake.
Mhm.
So I can totally understand the analogy of just feeling that overwhelm from trying to do so many things. So Given those kind of deviations of really what you set out to do versus what you've actually done, how do you feel about the plan that you're practicing now?
Well, it's only recent that I sort of reevaluated and made the discovery that things weren't going as well as I had hoped that they would. I really started to feel the effects in month 3 or 4 when I thought I had a really good idea where when you have a day job, your days are repetitive. You may not be having the same meetings or working on the exact same work day after day, but it starts to feel very repetitive. And I thought, I don't want my days to feel like that. I don't want to always feel like I'm doing the same thing day after day. So, in order to counteract that, I thought I was smart and I said, hey, on Mondays, that's going to be my work on a rental day, just as an example. On Tuesdays, I'm going to work on this woodworking project. On Wednesdays, I'm going to work on this project around my house. On Thursdays, I'm going to do yard work, just as an example. And I did that for a while. And then I found that I was never finishing those projects. So they were extending out for weeks and weeks. And then I was getting frustrated because another distraction would pop up and I wouldn't be able to get to that thing on that day. And then I would have to kick that to the following week. So now 2 weeks have lapsed since I've touched that thing last. And then that became kind of a point of frustration for my wife as well, where it was like, well, you said you were going to do this, but you didn't do it. You said you were going to work on that thing, or you said you were going to, whatever it was, and I wasn't following through with it. So I kind of more recently came to the realization that I really need to stick to one project at a time and work on it to completion before I start another project. And it probably sounds very obvious, and I know it does as I'm saying it, as I'm laughing as I'm saying it, but it seemed like a good idea at the time to have all these different things that I was juggling, but it eventually just became like cognitive overload that I was thinking about all these different things. Then I was getting frustrated when I wasn't able to hit my completion times. And then, of course, I was probably saying yes to too many things and not saying no to enough things. I was just piling more and more on my plate. But I think that's probably something that's common with people. Those of us that are in this community, we're a bit like overachievers where we've reached this point because we've been very intentional and we generally will have a lot of interests and we're trying to be as productive as we possibly can. And that's going to carry over into our personal lives. And that's what I struggled with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like you need a project manager for your life. As a former software dev, it sounds like you're running into the old Kanban problem that you need all your tasks prioritized and limit your work in progress and all the fun things. So
Yeah.
I know I'm probably giving you nightmares right now. So
No, that all sounds very true. And then I tried to do some of that prioritization as well, where we would go through and look at here's all the projects we want to do around our house. So here's the prioritization of those things. Here's all the projects we want to do on our rental properties. Prioritize those things and so on. But again, it was very foolish of me to think that I could spend Tuesdays for the next 6 weeks working on this project and Wednesdays for the next 6 weeks working on this other project. Like I thought it made sense because I would not get burned out by spending 2 solid weeks working on the same thing. But I mean, I don't know. I'm shifting in that direction now. I've been doing a bit of traveling lately, so I haven't fully embraced that in practice yet, other than getting this one rental property ready for a tenant. I've spent a lot of my energy solely focused on that. So I haven't been as distracted as of late with other things, which I think it's served me well for a bit more mental clarity.
that's right. Well, I'm going to have to make sure that I get involved in your planning meetings and see where podcasting falls in prioritization stack here. So I'll have to make sure that I slip Lori a 20 to prioritize podcasting.
Yeah, you're not wrong either. That it falls to the bottom, I mean, I want this to be something that I take very seriously, and I feel like I'm scrambling shortly before we get together to put my thoughts down as notes so that we can touch on them and make this sound as succinct as it possibly can. So it's definitely something that I want to work on and put that higher on the list.
Yeah, of course. And that's certainly something that we're going to talk about a little bit more deeply in our next episode is the goals that we have for this podcast. So stay tuned for that one. So, given everything that you're talking about and how you've had to change your plan and alter, maybe not your plan, but what you've put into practice so far, what things do you want to lean into more? What things do you want to step out of a little bit more? Can you talk to that in some depth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I honestly haven't found what I want to lean out of more, and I keep finding more and more interests that I want to lean more into. So I really just need to give myself grace that I can't do it all, and there needs to be some form of seasonality to the things. So like right now, the weather is still pretty hot. I probably am not going to go on as many hikes or as many bike rides. But as fall and autumn are upon us here, and hopefully the next couple of weeks, like those are the things that I want to lean more into and give myself time to do those things. So then I need to reevaluate, okay, where am I spending my time? What do I not focus on during that time so that I make sure that I prioritize those while the weather is nice. And then as the season changes to more of a wet season, cold, and I'm not doing as much of that stuff, then I need to figure out what I'm going to spend my time on. And whatever I didn't do during the hiking and biking season, that's what I can do then. So yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. And I think that anybody that is in this situation, especially when they're new, that's going to be a lot of experimentation along the way.
Yeah. Turns out throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks is definitely a viable strategy.
There's always going to be new interests and new distractions that are going to come up. One thing that I learned in talking to Doug was that he just puts a lot of white space into his calendar. Like he doesn't really hard schedule much of anything,
Sure.
just a couple hours a day. Where I was trying to schedule like almost every hour of the day.
Yep. Back to that every 15 minutes, something better be documented of what you're spending your time on.
Yeah.
With all of this, would you feel like you've got the right amount of activities in each of your days right now? Or are you still that overstimulated kind of state?
Well, I like that phrase overstimulated because I think that is what I experienced a lot of early on. And that kind of led to some of the burnout. But I'm getting better at backing off of all the things that I'm trying to cram into a single day and just really trying to focus on like one or two things for the day, one or two big things, let's say. Like this podcast is one of my just a couple of big things for the day. And I don't need to schedule the rest of my day. I can just let it kind of come to me. That's a little bit of a hard adjustment for me because I did come from a background where I was blocking out every hour. Every hour had to have a purpose. If you listen to Cal Newport, it's like every hour has to have a purpose. It's very similar to you need a budget where every dollar has to have a job. Every hour has to have a job, basically, is what my mind tells me. But I just have to slow down. Yeah, so I think that it is getting better. Time will tell. It's an experiment, it's a journey. I think it's going to be better for my mental health to only have just one or two items a day and hopefully reduce that overstimulation.
I was going to say, even when I asked you the number of items in a day, you started to say one, and then you're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe there are a few more things today. So I'll try and keep you honest on
Yeah,
that. I'm sure it's a battle,
it
but
is.
what I'm hearing here is, first of all, once a planner, always a planner,
Yep.
and trying to rip that script up and say, hey, that was old Josh, and I'm evolving into new Josh in this post FI world.
So speaking of once a planner, always a planner, and going back to my day job, I felt like I always did a good job of like playing a bit of defense So there was no shortage of the amount of inputs that were coming at me on a daily basis where I was constantly in a state where I knew I had to say no to things. I had to protect my time and I had to protect my sanity. So I would constantly be reviewing those items, projects, and requests. And I got really good at saying no or not right now or, just a form of no. So that's what I need to do for myself. It's harder to do it for yourself than it is to other people. I mean, at this stage in my life, it's hard to tell people no because everybody thinks I have a lot of free time available. But it's also hard to tell myself no. Like, hey, it's okay that you didn't go on a bike ride this week, or it's okay that you didn't go on a hike this week. Those are the things that I'm still struggling with. And I think it's going to take time. I really am just still in that mindset of like, I have all this time. I want to do all these things. But yeah, I don't have that much time. I don't have that much energy, honestly.
Yes, I believe it. The old adage of people saying it's a mystery how I ever had time to work really does ring true, is what it sounds like. To me, your story just reiterates how when people bring up the concept of, well, what am I going to do in retirement? I'm going to be bored,
Yeah.
right? And you're just showing time and time again, like, give yourself a little bit of time to understand that you need the mental space to allow things to kind of flow into your life and come to you in that regard. And you'll have so many opportunities that you'll be swanning them away with a fly swatter. Is that same case of where you talked about your first day. And I remember texting you and saying, hey, Josh, did you take that bike ride today? I knew that that was vitally important to you to make sure that you wanted to do that on your first day. But after that, you had that little sense of doubt to me is, oh no, like, what am I going to do the rest of the day? I have all this time and I don't have the script that I have to follow that we're so ingrained as W 2 employees to just say, hey, somebody else plan my day. All I got to do is go out and execute. It is that mental shift to allow yourself to let the things that are important to you enter into your mental zone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And don't know if I mentioned it before, but there was a period of time shortly before I left my day job where I had a bit of doubt and a bit of concern that I wasn't going to have enough to occupy my time. Like I literally thought at one point that what if I get bored? And now I'm almost hoping to figure out how to get bored. But so there's a little bit of anxiety there that I would imagine, like you mentioned, that other people have that I probably overcompensated for. I had that, even though I knew and I had all these lists and I did all this preparation and went through all these mental exercises, I still had that little bit of doubt in my mind. Like, what if I accomplish all these things and I don't have anything to do? Which is like, there's no way it's going to happen that I'm going to accomplish all these things. I got lists that can last me for years and more things keep getting added all the time. But, but still, I find myself overcompensating because I also have the mental framework or whatever you want to call it that I feel like I need to be productive. So I got to do all these things to show that, hey, I'm not just sitting around doing nothing. I'm actually productive with my time too. And that's a hard one. That'll take time, and more conversations like this one to talk through how to self actualize your time that you are being productive, even if you are doing just one thing a day.
That's right. I mean, my time is not like just right off camera there, and that's all you're doing is sipping cocktails over there.
Yeah.
Clearly, just kidding around. Maybe another question that I would ask you is would you consider yourself a people pleaser?
Yeah. Yep. What people are you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's probably family,
Yeah.
right? I think when I would identify as a people pleaser as well. And so, like, at work and being these generally type A personalities or high performers, etc., you just want to feel like the answer is always yes, I can always deliver, and I'll outperform my peers and be rewarded for it, right? And so then when you shift, I would think when you shift to the other side of the equation in retirement of whether you have the honeydew lists or just your internal locus of things that you feel like you want to accomplish to maintain that semblance of productivity or feeling like you're spending your time wisely, that notion enters in where you are constantly trying to make sure that you can say, yeah, hey, I've appropriately used my time today. And so, like you said, you probably overcompensate even more so just because you're saying, oh, well, like Elliot asked me to go do something. Well, I've got five other things to do, but I like hanging out with him and
Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint, so I'll say yes. And how that list just continues to grow.
You're absolutely right. And actually, it was hard for me to tell you no about getting together earlier this week because you were wanting to get together. And I was like, I really want to, and I don't want to say no. But I ended up saying no, which I was kind of doing some self-talk. But you're absolutely right. And this is maybe evolving into a bit of a therapy session, but I would say that in my career, I was definitely that say yes man for a very long time. And it wasn't until I was nearing the end, the last couple of years, that I really, and it was funny too, because I actually, the more I felt like I said no, I got a couple more promotions without even trying. It was really an odd occurrence. But anyway, I felt like I was saying no a lot more at work. And, but at the same time, I felt a sense of guilt if I did that. I felt a sense of guilt if I would step out of something where I knew that people would ask me to either be there or be active in that project or whatever it was. And it would enter my mind later, or if I'd hear an update on it or something, I would think that, oh, I should have been a part of that. And so that's, I feel like, how life is a little bit now, where I'm still guilty if I say no, because then I'm thinking, oh, did Elliot, was he not able to take part in anything this week because I wasn't able to take him to go, it's just, it's that kind of stuff. And of course, if I tell somebody that I'm gonna build them something or that I'm gonna help them with something and then I drag my feet on it, then that guilt is like in the back of my mind constantly like, oh, I'm letting somebody down, even though they're probably not in any hurry for it.
Little do you know, I have my permanent record and your name was written with a nice demerit across
Yeah.
it. So it is very funny in how we probably perceive actions and in reality, like nobody cares.
Yeah,
Like it,
we're our own worst critics.
like 100%.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, I think this is probably a good spot to kind of wrap. But is there anything else that we want to leave our listeners with?
I think I would just say that in summary, it's going to be an evolution. If you're on the path to financial independence and you haven't yet retired, and if you're thinking a lot about what life is going to look like, you're probably going to be in for a bit of a surprise. It's probably not going to be quite as you expected, and be prepared to be flexible and okay with change. There should be a lot of other interests that are going to come along and other opportunities that are going to be competing for your time and attention. And it's just going to take some time to figure all that out. And it might be an ongoing, continuous evolution.
That's right. And maybe one more thing that I would leave the listeners with is a question to ponder. Do you think you're one of those people that fall into the category of thinking that you're going to be bored once you retire? Do you have enough interest in your life that you think that that's really going to be an issue? Or do you think you're going to be like Josh, maybe, and all of a sudden you're drowning in possibility? So, with that, we'll conclude. But I would say if you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate if you hit that like button on YouTube or the podcast player of your choice. Follow, subscribe, all the things. But we've really enjoyed having this conversation as always.